thank you, Jorge. My profound apologies that I don't speak Spanish. Great pleasure to be back in Barcelona, to be back in the warm embrace of Anagrama. For many years I tried to dissuade Jorge from using this phrase, dream team. I never succeeded. I told him it sounded much better to a Spanish ear than an English ear, but never mind. The impulse is what is very important. It's very difficult, I think, to approach climate change as a subject in a novel. The subject itself is overladen with statistics, with hard science, with contested politics, and most problematically from the point of view of a writer, it's full of issues of virtue and morality, and for many years I hesitated over this subject. I was drawn to it. I think it's very important for us all, and an interesting challenge to the novelist, but I couldn't find a way in. And it wasn't until I found myself at a conference about climate change, and there were many Nobel Prize winners there, and I saw suddenly walking towards me out of a mist a character who I awarded the Nobel Prize to straight away. This is very much a character-led novel, and it was only the character of the central person of Michael Beard that brought human warmth, as it were, even though he's something of a monster. It brought human warmth to a set of abstract problems. I hadn't intended really to write a comic novel, but the character seemed to demand it of me, and all novelists hope in the course of their work to be surprised, and I think particularly they hope to be surprised by the characters they create, and I certainly was in this. This is not a book that tells people how to live. It sets out to reflect the problem, and the problem particularly in relation to how human nature is uniquely challenged by a problem that we've never faced before, requiring degrees of altruism and cooperation and doing favors for generations that we'll never meet. All of these running quite contrary to our instincts and social arrangements. So I'm very happy to talk about this and anything else that you want to address. Michael Beard starts off as a climate change skeptic, and then for very cynical reasons becomes a passionate advocate of climate change and climate change science. Does he reflect the mainstream view of scientists? Absolutely not. The mainstream of climate science is overwhelmingly of the view that we are warming the planet. The latest data from both the Arctic and the Antarctic is extremely alarming. 4 or 5 years ago, that data, I think, would be headlines, but the public has got bored with the subject, politicians have got bored, the media are bored, but that does not change the facts. 2010 was one of the warmest years. It's unfortunate, I think, that the two land masses on the planet that dictate so much of the policy in climate change, which is the United States and northwestern Europe, suffered very cold winters. And we're all subject to a kind of parochial, local view that makes us think, well, if it's a cold day outside, then climate change is not happening. But in general, the average temperature of the Earth was warm in 2010. And I really would make the point that Michael Beard does not embody my own views of this matter. He's a kind of extreme version of us all. He's a consumer, very loath to give up his comforts, and a creator of some chaos around him. And in many ways he reflects for me, as it turned out, sadly, the spirit of the famous debacle of Copenhagen in the end of 2009, which ended in farce and tears, and was very much, I think, in the spirit of Solar. This is not a novel that's on every page of which is comedy. There are certain comic episodes, and one of the attractions of the form of the novel for me is that it's rather like, say, a classical symphony in its nature, capable of shifting moods and shifting contexts. So I have varied reflections on climate change, and indeed Michael Beard gives a lecture on climate change, with thoughts about the nature of modern media, of postmodern scholarship, of male sexual jealousy, and many other points of view, and of the also reflections on the relationships between science and the humanities. Michael Beard, when he's a student, seduces a girl by rapidly learning everything there is to know about the great English poet John Milton, of whom he knows nothing, but he discovers he can become quite plausible within a week. I'm wanting to really discuss that relationship between the spirit of humanities and the spirit of science. So all these subjects were interspersed with comic episodes, really, in which Michael Beard, not a pleasant man, but becomes a comic victim, sometimes of chaos that he's created himself. I give him a press storm. Anyone who's lived in England a while will know that we love to have a storm in our newspapers every now and then, in fact every week. And to be the object of that storm is a most curious and enlightening and terrifying process. So I've seen it with my friends, I've experienced it a couple of times myself, and I thought, well, I'll lend this in a comic spirit to Michael Beard. So the comedy really is a way of trying to persuade the reader to spend time, or to get into bed with, if you like, a character that they might usually cross the street to avoid. My view of what the novel does is primarily that it's a form of investigation, of discovery of what we are, of human nature. I didn't want to create a hero who, with a sword in his hand, was going to solve this problem, because that's not my sense of how this is going to happen. I think we need an industrial revolution. In many ways, the whole problem could be stated quite simply. We need clean energy to drive our civilization. We really have to struggle, though, to implement this. The kinds of people who made the first industrial revolution back in the 18th century, starting in the Midlands of England, were not idealists in the sense that we'd understand Greenpeace or Friends of the Earth to be idealists. They were often ruthless, ambitious, scheming, cynical, exploiting men. It's quite possible that if we solve this problem, it would be the same kind of people who address the problem. It won't be virtue that delivers us. It will be self-interest and possibly even greed. In fact, I sometimes think, well, we might scrape through, we might succeed, but we won't succeed by being good. We'll succeed because we're very frightened and we want to survive, and some people will want to make a great deal of money.